I'm always hearing the same story from folks who jump on a budget pre-built gaming PC. They get a sleek case, a flashy logo, maybe a 1080p monitor, and a few weeks later the frame rates stall, the temps climb, and they wonder why that cheap deal feels like a regret. Those cheap alternatives often disappoint after purchase, and the hesitation you feel before you click Add to Cart is real. That's why I wanted to see if the MSI Vision RS AI gaming desktop actually feels like a smarter buy instead of another nice-looking, but under-delivered system. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the Vision RS is positioned as a premium Al-Anon gaming rig, and the headline specs certainly catch the eye. An Intel Ultra 7265K processor, NVIDIA GeForce RTX 5080, 64GB of DDR5 memory, a 2TB NVMe SSD, and a full liquid cooling loop. On paper that looks like a machine built for 4K ray-traced gaming, heavy multitasking, and VR sessions without breaking a sweat. But what does that mean once you plug it in and start your day? I set up the Vision RS in a typical small room gaming corner, connecting a 27-inch 144Hz monitor, a USB-C dock for my laptop, and a couple of USB-A peripherals. The first thing you notice is the simplicity of the exterior, a minimalist chassis, with a single LED strip that can be turned off if you prefer a low-profile look. There are no massive towers or cluttered front panels, which makes it blend into a living room setup better than most gamer boxes. The case isn't tiny, but it's far from a bulky desktop, and the built-in liquid cooling keeps the surface temperature cool enough that you can safely place a coffee mug next to it without worrying about heat transfer. Performance-wise, the RTX 5080 paired with the Ultra 7 CPU lives up to the hype. I launched Cyberpunk 2077 on the highest preset, with ray tracing set to Psycho, and DLSS on, and the game consistently delivered around 70 frames per second at 4K. That's the kind of smoothness you only see on enthusiast-grade rigs with separate high-end GPUs. So the Vision RS does eliminate the "I'm stuck at 30 frames per second" regret that many budget builds suffer from. The 64GB of DDR5 RAM also means you can have a dozen Chrome tabs, Photoshop, and a game server running simultaneously without any noticeable slowdowns. For streamers, this translates into being able to run OBS, encode at high bit rates, and still have headroom for background tasks like music playlists or chat moderation tools. One of the practical strengths that often gets glossed over in spec sheets is the 2TB NVMe SSD. Loading times on large, texture-heavy titles drop to under 10 seconds from cold boot, and the extra capacity means you can store a sizable library of modern games, a collection of 4K video footage, and still have space for future installs. The 1000 WPSU, while overkill for most single GPU setups, gives you room to add a second GPU or high-end expansion cards later, which is a hidden value that only becomes apparent when you think about future-proofing. Now, no machine is perfect, and the Vision RS has a few trade-offs worth mentioning before you decide. Because the design is deliberately streamlined, the internal layout is tighter than a custom-built tower. That means while you can upgrade the SSDs or add extra storage bays, swapping out the GPU or the CPU is more involved. You'll need to open the case, disconnect the liquid cooling block, and follow a specific removal sequence. If you're the type who loves to tinker, swap in a newer graphics card every year, or experiment with custom water loops, this might feel restrictive. The liquid cooling itself does a great job keeping temperatures low, but the pump does emit a faint hum that becomes audible if you have a very quiet room. It's not a screaming fan, but it's something you'll notice if you're sensitive to background noise. Pricing is the other practical consideration. The Vision RS lands in the high-end segment, and while the performance numbers justify a premium, it's still a sizable investment. If you're a casual gamer who's happy playing at 1080p on medium settings, you'll probably be better off spending that money on a quality 144Hz monitor, or a better headset instead. On the other hand, if you're already planning to dive into VR, do serious 4K video editing, or run a Twitch channel with high-quality production values, the all-in-one nature of the Vision IS saves you the hassle of sourcing separate components, dealing with cable management, and troubleshooting compatibility issues. Another subtle downside is the lack of a traditional optical drive. This isn't a deal-breaker for most modern users, but if you have a library of physical game discs, or need to install software from a DVD, you'll have to rely on an external USB optical drive, which adds another peripheral to manage. The built-in USB-C port is a nice touch. It supports power delivery and video out, making it easy.